and today I'm going to show you how to make this really cute little floral bracelet. I'm kind of on a flower kick and I'm really into this particular stitch lately. So I've devised several different ways to use the same basic stitching to make several different types of bracelets. So this is another one, almost really close to the rondelle one I showed you. A little bit easier. It's just using seed beads, and we make a flower at the end for clasping, and then a loop so that we can just go around it like this and clasp it on. And that's what that looks like. And I'll show you what it looks like on the wrist also. And here it is. I think it's just absolutely adorable. And the clasping works pretty darn good. You wouldn't want to put a ton of pressure on it, you know, but it's working pretty good. It doesn't fall off. It wears well. It's cute. So I think that it just turned out really cute. And maybe you'll want to hang around and learn how to make one. If so, let's look at the material list. Okay, for this project today, I am using 6/0 seed beads. So this is a Toho, and it's a pearlized turquoise color. And about a 20-gram bag that should be more than enough. Then I'm going to be using 8/0 seed beads and 11/0 seed beads. You won't need very many 11/0s. It's mainly for a clasping portion, but you will need 11/0s. And these are both Toho also, and they are Starlight. It's the galvanized permanent finish gold tone seed bead in the Toho line. Then I'm going to be using 8-pound Fireline in the smoke color because it seems to camouflage better in the smoke color. You can certainly use the crystal color, and you can use a 6 or 8-pound. You can also use a 10-pound, perhaps even an 8-pound nanofill if you would like. I'm using a size 10 beading needle. You can use a size 10 or 12 with this project. Either will work fine. Put onto your needle a wingspan of Fireline or nanofill. Wingspan is when you spread your arms out from side to side. Measure from the first hand fingertips, the length of the arm, across the chest, the length of the second arm, to the fingertips on that arm. You will need to extend your Fireline or nanofill for this project, and I will leave a link in the description box below to show you how to do that if you do not know how. Now let's go ahead and get started on this project. Okay, we're going to start this project by picking up 4 6/0 seed beads onto our needle. And we're just going to bring them down to the end of the thread. And you want to leave a good 8 to 10 inches to sew on your clasping portion that we're going to make. So leave a nice length of tail, and then go back through the first seed bead. And then sew through all of the seed beads. Let me get you a little closer here. I'm just going to sew all the way back through, one at a time. And then when I get to where my tail thread and my working thread meet, I am then going to tie a knot. So I'm going to take my tail and my working thread and just tie an overhand knot twice. Pull it tight. I want to make sure that this first unit doesn't slip. Then what I'm going to do, just to have my thread in the proper place, when I go to put on my clasping, I'm just going to take my tail thread and I'm going to put it right through the 6/0 seed bead right next to where the knot is here. Just like that. So that it's through the bead, ready to use, and I don't have to worry about sewing it back through after I have all my other beads on here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm coming out where this knot is right here, and this is where my tail is. This very next bead, I'm going to go through it. Then I'm going to pick up an 8/0 seed bead. I'm going to go into the bead straight across from the bead I am coming out of. Let's get just a little closer. And I am going to go into this bead right here on the same side. And then I am going to bring this bead down and push it into the middle. As I do this, I'm going to put my thumb on top, pull my thread, and I'm going to squish that bead down inside of these beads as much as I can. This first one, it'll stick up a little bit because we tied our knot really tight before putting this on. So this first one will stick up just a little bit, and that's okay. Then we're coming out of this side, we're going to go into the 8/0 seed bead right here and pull the thread through, hold on to your piece with your thumb and your finger, and just pull and kind of squish that 8/0 down as you do that. And then we're going to go into the bead straight across here on the same side. So this is what you should have. Now we're going to pick up 8/0 seed beads and we're going to go in between each bead. So I'm coming out of this 8/0 or this 6/0, I'm going to go into the next 6/0 and I'm going to place an 8/0 seed bead in between them like this. I'm going to pick up another and go into the next 6/0. I'm going to try to tuck that tail out of the way. It's going to get in our way for a little bit here. Put your thumb and your finger over the flower, hold it, and pull that 8/0 down. And then again. Like this. And one more time. Okay, so now I want to find where my tail is because I want that to be on the very end here. So then I am going to go into, since I'm coming out right here, I can go right into this bottom one. If you're not close or straight across from where your tail is, then just sew to it. But we have ended right here, right on the opposite side, so we can go into this 8/0 seed bead here. Just making sure my tail is on one side, my working thread is on the other side. Now I can pick up 4 of my 6/0 seed beads and I go directly into the opposite side of the bead I'm coming out of and just pull this down. And now I'm going to sew around these beads that I just put on. You can go one at a time, it makes a better shape, but if you're impatient like I am, you can go another one. Or 2, but it's going to kind of make them wonky looking, but that's okay. Then we're going to go into this one here. Now, when we get to where our 8/0 seed bead is, right here, we're going to skip across it and go into the 6/0. Don't go into that 8/0, just go straight across into the 6/0 seed bead. That's going to pull our beads into the form that we're trying to achieve. Now that we're coming out of this bead here, we're going to put our center bead on. So right after you skip that 8/0 and come through this bead, then you're going to pick up an 8/0 and you're going to go directly across. So it's at a diagonal here. You're going to go to the bead directly across from the one you're coming out of. Go into the same side you're coming out of. And I put my thumb over it just so that I can control everything. Push that 8/0 into the center, then I put my thumb over the top and squeeze it down into there. So that my 8/0 is more recessed. And it's not going to be completely yet, but that's okay. Now I'm coming out of this side of this bead. I'm going to go up into the 8/0 right here. I'm going to put my thumb over the top. As I pull, I'm going to squish that 8/0 down so that it's between the beads a little better. It'll spread the beads out. That's okay. Don't worry about that. Now the bead we started in on the opposite side is the bead we're going to go into over here. I'm going to go into that one. And again, put your thumb over it, squeeze that 8/0 down between the beads the best you can, and then we're going to put on some 8/0s between the beads and even this all out. So I have that 8/0 kind of squished down in there. So when I pull my next 8/0 in from the 6/0 to the 6/0, I'll put my finger over it and keep that 8/0 down in the middle and push and pull this one together, or pull it down tight. And once you start putting more beads in, it'll straighten out the 6/0s. So now I have another 8/0. I'm going into the next 6/0. I'm keeping my thumb on my finger, a little bit of pressure, so that that 8/0 in the center stays recessed. Sorry about that. Let's actually get you in a little closer, and I'll move my hand down. There we go. Now we're coming out of this 6/0 here. We're going to pick up another 8/0. We're going to go into the next 8/0, and just the 8/0, just like this, pull through, holding your thumb and your finger over so that that one in the middle stays down in the middle. And now we're going to go into this 11/0 seed bead here. That will give a little extra strength for the joint here, because the first time we sew around, we skip it. So the second time that we're next to it, we go through it to give it another run of thread for strength. Now we have to sew down to this 8/0, so we're just going to go into the 6/0 seed beads. Here, give a little tug, go into the next 6/0, skipping the 8/0, and then you can go into the bottom 11/0 also, just like this. And then pull. Give a nice little tug, and that's what your unit should look like. Now let's make our next one. We're going to pick up 4 6/0 seed beads. We're coming out of this 8/0 here. We are going to go into the opposite side. Hang on, let me reposition here. So we're coming out of this 8/0, we're going to go into the opposite side and pull the beads down. Now you're going to sew through, skipping the 8/0 as you come around. So go ahead and sew through your beads. And this time we're going to skip the 8/0. So we're just going to go right past it and go into this bead right past the 8/0 that's connecting our new unit. Now this is where we put on our center bead. We pick up an 8/0. We find the bead directly across from the bead we're coming out of, and we go into that bead on the same side that we're coming out of this bead. So we're coming out here, we're going to go into here. And we're going to bring that 8/0 seed bead down. Hold on to your piece. I know my thumb is in the way, but it's very important to hold your pieces so that you have control over them and they turn out nice and neat. I'm pulling this one over the top. I'm going to squish that 8/0 down as much as I can in between the beads, and then I'm going to go into the 8/0 again, right here. Pull and squish. It wants to work its way out, which, you know, if it pops up a little bit, that's okay. You just don't want it up a whole lot. And then we're going to go into the opposite side of the bead we started in. So we're going to go here. And again, just grab a hold of it. Doesn't take a lot of pulling. I'm doing gentle tugs. Just the gentle tugs and pushes to put it right where I want it. And then I will sew 8/0s in between the 6/0s. So I'm going to pick up an 8/0, go into the next 6/0. And then we're going to pick up an 8/0, go into the next 6/0. And then we're going to pick up an 8/0 and go into this next 6/0. And this time, oops, that 8/0 is twisted. Make sure they go down between your beads properly. And then this time I will sew through this 8/0 seed bead right here that connects us to give us a second pass of thread through it. Just like that. And now I'll sew through this 8/0 and this 8/0 and this 11/0. Just to get in the place that I need to be to make my next unit. So if you can go through both the 8/0s like that, that's fine. If you can't, do one at a time. pull this all together tight, little tugs, and then go into this 8/0. Let's do one more, and then we'll go to length, and then I'll show you how to make the clasping portion, and then we'll sew that on. So let's pick up 4 8/0 seed beads and go into the opposite side of the bead we're coming out of. Pull them down, and then we will sew back through all of these beads, skipping the 8/0 as we come around. I'm going to do one at a time just to show you how much neater it is if you do one at a time. If you sew, it still distorts some, but if you sew one at a time, usually you'll get a little bit better shape. And now that I'm all the way around, I'm going to skip this 8/0 and go into this one right here. And now, oops, let's get back in camera here. So I went all the way around, skipped the 8/0, came through this 6/0, and now I'm going to pick up an 8/0, and I'm going to go into the bead directly across from the bead I'm coming out of on the same side I'm coming out of. So from this bead to this bead, I will bring my 8/0 seed bead down, push it over the top, push my finger on top, or my thumb on top of it, and kind of squish it down between the beads and give it a little tug at the same time. And now I have to go up into the 8/0 again, so I'm coming out of this side, I go into this side right here. Put my thumb over that bead so that as I draw my thread through, I don't pull it up from the beads that I want it embedded in between. And then, see if I can get you a little closer, we'll go into this side. So we started on this side, we're going to go into this side. Anchor that bead down in there really nice. Push it down, pull, and you have your bead in the proper position. Then we're going to pick up an 8/0 and go into the next bead. And then an 8/0, go into the next bead. And an 8/0, go into the next bead. And this time we sew through the 8/0. And then just sew through the 8/0s and the bottom 11/0. I keep getting out of camera. Okay, down into this one and then into this one. And now you're ready to do your next unit, and that's basically all there is to it. It's just repetitive. Just keep doing the same thing until you're about an inch short of the length you want, and we'll be back. Okay, I have gone to length, which for me is right at 6 inches. This way, my bracelet should end up to be about a 7-inch bracelet. If you are a very small person, you'll want to make about 5 inches. If you are a larger person, you'll probably want to make 7 inches. And then what you will do is you'll sew through the last unit just to secure it. Just sew through it one more time. Come out of the 11/0 seed bead and take your needle off and set this aside. Then put another piece of thread onto your needle that's about 1 arm's length. So measure from your fingertips to your shoulder, and that should be more than enough for our clasping unit. We're going to make a flower for our clasp and then sew it onto our bracelet. So this time, instead of picking up 4 of our 6/0 seed beads, we're going to pick up 5 6/0 seed beads. Let me get you in here. And then once you have picked up your 5, then you are going to bring it to the end of your thread. You don't have to leave a long tail, but you do need to leave enough to tie a knot. Then we're just going to go ahead and just tie a knot. Just bring your tail and your working thread together and tie an overhand knot, and then do that one more time, making sure that your knot goes between your beads and not on top of them. Just like this. Once you have done that, then we're just going to sew through the entire thing again. We want to make this extremely strong because it is a clasp and it's going to have some tension on it. So as you do this, just try not to drag your knot into the beads themselves. Just kind of sew around all the way until you get back to your knot. Excuse me. And then tie another knot with the working thread and the tail thread, just to make it really secure. Then we're going to sew into 2 beads. Now because we have 5 beads on this, we're not going to have a direct opposite bead to sew into. So we're just going to select one, and we're going to pick up an 8/0 seed bead, and we're going to attach it like we've been attaching it before, but then we're going to secure it more through all the beads. So I want to try to grab a bead that's as across as I can get it. It's not going to be directly because, as I said, we have an odd number here. So I'm going to use this one. I have an 8/0. I'm going to go up through this bead. On the same side I'm coming out of this bead, so straight up. And I'm going to guide this bead down into the center of my circle. As I do that, I can just kind of push it down in there. Like this. Now all of these beads aren't going to go completely down in there, but they're going to go in there pretty well. So just try to guide it down in there, especially on this one, as best as you can. Now I'm coming out of this side of the bead. I'm going to go into this side of the 8/0. Just straight up through this 8/0. And pull your thread, and then go into the opposite side of the bead you started in. So right here. Do that one more time. So just go into this bead, and then into your side bead. See, is that the one I started in? Doesn't truly matter, but I think I'll go into this one. We're just going to anchor it down again. So you can go into the next one if you've lost your thread, which is easy to do because it sinks down in there and you can't tell. So just make sure you go around a bead fully. And then because we want this to be very strong, we're going to anchor it on these 2 sides too. So now that I've gone through and anchored it down on my beads this way, I'm going to go up into one of these side beads. So I'm going to go into this one, straight down into the beads. Well, actually, you can't go straight down. You have to go to the side because now it's facing sideways. But go back into the center bead. Excuse me. And now we want to anchor it to this bead here. Just go to the side and pick one of the beads that's most direct in center with it. And then go into that bead. So all we're doing is just anchoring it down the best we can. Now I have to go sideways into this bead. This really isn't hard. When you get it in your hand, you'll be able to see it's really, really easy. Okay, so now I have that bead anchored in there pretty darn well. I'm going to come up through one of the 8/0s here. I'm going to cut my tail thread down a little bit, like this. Oops, and pull it out of camera because you know, gotta do that. And then I'm going to pick up an 8/0 seed bead, and I'm going to travel around putting in the 8/0s. So I'm going to go into the next 6/0. and all the way around. And this one, I'm just going to go ahead and go up through my 8-0. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to sew around this entire thing, 8-0s included, several times just to give it more strength, so, and shape, and that way it will function as a clasp pretty well. So I'm just going to start sewing through all of my beads. I'm coming out of this 8-0, I'm going to go into the 6-0 and the next 8-0, and I'm going to go ahead and sew all the way around. And I'm going to do it one more time. So just go ahead and continue. You can sew 2, 3 times, however many times you have the patience for. But at least 2 passes through, because like I said, this is going to get a lot of tension on it, a lot of abuse. So we need to make sure that it's pretty darn strong. Okay, so I'm all the way around again. Now I'm going to go through a couple more beads, and right between the beads, so right between this 8-0 and this 6-0, I'm going to stick my needle up through the middle here, like this. You see how that's coming through? And I'm just going to guide that thread between the 8-0 and the 6-0 bead and make a loop. Excuse me, my allergies are getting me today. I apologize. And I am just going to pull that knot down in there. And then I'm going to go into a couple more here. And do the same thing. Just kind of, there's a little space between the 8-0s and right underneath, or between the 6-0s and right underneath that 8-0. You can get your needle in there and then go through the loop you create, and just make sure as you pull it, you guide it between the beads. And then sew a couple more times. So make sure you put in at least 2, maybe 3 knots. Sew away from your knots a couple of beads. I'm going to go one more time here. And then you can cut off your thread. Maybe a little shorter than that. And then I'm just going to burn this one down, just melt it, let it just turn into a blob, and kind of tuck it in there, like that. And this is what you should have, just like this. Now, you can see that this side, the 8-0 sticks out a little more than this side, and that's the side that we're going to want to anchor on. Let me get rid of this other little tail I left from the very beginning. Melt that down, tuck it in. Now, I'm going to grab my bracelet, and I'm going to put my needle back on my thread that I left. So I'm going to put it on the shorter end to do this, because I have a longer end on the other side, so I had a lot of thread left. And I'm just going to use the shorter end here, and hopefully you left a pretty nice long tail, and that way you can put your needle back on that tail, and we will put on our clasping. So go ahead and rethread your needle. I'll be right back. I have rethreaded my needle, and I actually wish I would have left even just a little bit longer tail. So leave yourself about 12 inches of a tail, just because it's easier to work with. So this is the side that I started my project in, and when I very first did it, I went through this, I put the thread through this 6-0 seed bead so it would be available to me. Now I can just go up through this 11-0 right here, or excuse me, 8-0 right here. And now look at your flower, and the side that's most pokey outy, is this side is kind of recessed. We are going to sew through that 8-0 seed bead to put this on. So what we're going to do is now we're going to use some 11-0s. And we're going to pick up an 11-0. We're going to go through this 8-0 seed bead that's in the center here. So just lift it a little bit and go right through it, just like this. And then pick up an 11-0 seed bead and go through the opposite side of the 8-0 on your bracelet. And pull this down. This is what this should look like. Now we're just going to sew back through these beads. So you can push your flower down like this. Go up through the 11-0 on this side. Pull it. Go through the 8-0 and pull it. Go through the 11-0 on this side. And make sure after each pass you give them a little tug so that everything is nice and tight and neat and will lay the proper way. Now, just continue doing that. Do that at least one more time. You can do it twice if you feel like it, if you have enough thread, and make sure you reserve enough thread so that when we come back, we can sew through and knot this. So go ahead and at least put one more pass of thread through there. So I have gone through again, and I'm coming out of my 8-0 seed bead after finishing my securing stitch. Now I'm going to go into this 8-0 or this 6-0 and this 8-0 here, and then up through the beads like I showed you previously. Right underneath that 8-0 you can usually get your needle right in there, and then you can just guide your thread over between the 8-0 and the 6-0, make a loop and guide your thread down just like that. Now go ahead and sew through another 8-0 and 6-0. And I want to move down into this next flower just to give it a lot more security. So I'm going to go down into this 8-0 and this 6-0 and 8-0 right here. Make sure I'm camera here. And I am going to tie a knot here. And then I'm going to sew around this entire unit because it looks a little loose. So anytime you have a unit, even while you're making it, that looks a little loose, you can always just go ahead and sew around the entire unit. So I'm just going to sew all the way around this entire unit. Including the 8-0s, not just the 6-0s. And I am going to then, after I've done that, tie another knot, and that will make it really secure. You can go through the whole bracelet doing that if you'd like, but if it looks like it's loose and it needs a little help, then you can do that. I'm going to go down through this one, over here, and tie another knot. Just make sure your thread is following the original thread path so it doesn't lay on top of your beads funny. And now I can just go down into this one, and I'll tie one more knot in this one and cut my thread off because my thread is getting very short. So, and I had plenty to do this, so you don't have to leave an extremely long tail. Okay. Now I'm going to cut this down and burn it down. And it goes right into that bead perfectly. And let me show you what I have. There's my clasping. See how pretty it is? It just makes a nice little flower. It pulls that 8-0 down in. That's why we secure it between all the beads, so that that 8-0, as it's pulled through, it won't come completely out. So you need to make sure that this unit is really well secured, the 8-0 and the outside beads. Now that is my clasping unit. I will then go down and put my needle on my leftover working thread, and we'll be back. Okay, So I have put my needle on my working thread. Now, if you haven't secured this last unit, or maybe even these last 2 units, go ahead and sew around them. Come out the 8/0 seed bead, making sure that you have a nice, secure couple units to work from here, because again, this part gets abuse, so we want to make sure it's strong. Now, I want to make a loop to go around the flower I just created on the other end. So first I'm going to pick up an 11/0 seed bead and then an 8/0 seed bead to work myself away from this area here to give myself an attachment. And then I'm going to drop those down. And then I'm going to pick up a series of 11/0 seed beads that will be long enough to go around this bead. Now, I haven't pre-calculated this, so I'm going to go ahead and just do it. I'm just going to start picking up 11/0 seed beads, and then I will show you how to test to see if you have enough. I'll tell you how many I have made on mine, but you still may want to test, because different seed beads, even in the same brand, sometimes can be a little bit different size, and it won't always necessarily fit perfectly on something like this. So I'm going to go ahead and figure out how many I need. I'll come back and show you exactly what to do. I have picked out 20 seed beads. Now, I don't know if this is going to work perfectly, so what I am going to do, let's get you a little closer here. What I'm going to do now is I am going to go back through this 8/0 seed bead on my piece right here. So I have all these 11/0s. I'm coming back through this 8/0 that I dropped down. I'm going to pick it up, go through it, and then draw all of these down, pick up another 11/0, because we want it to match the other side, so pick up another 11/0, go through this 8/0 seed bead right here. Now, do not secure anything at this point. Just wrap it around your finger so that it's nice and tight and you don't get any moving of the beads, and slide it around your clasp and see how it looks. And that's actually, I could probably take maybe 2 of them off. I picked up 20, so I think I'm going to take off 2 because I don't want it to be too long. Let me also measure it and see what I've got for length to make sure that this is going to fit me. If I need a little more length, now it's right at 7 inches. Let me show you. It's right at 7 inches. Come on, Gina, get this right. So that'll probably about right for me. So I really don't want to shorten this anymore. So I'm just going to go ahead and leave the 20 beads on there. And I'm going to go ahead and secure it. So this part you can do a little bit of your own modifications too. So let me show you what I've got. This is what it looks like. So you picked up your 11/0 and an 8/0, and then the amount of beads you need, and then you go through the 8/0, pick up another 11/0, and go through your attaching 8/0. Then you're going to go ahead and sew up through all these beads again. So I'm coming out right here. I'm going to go up into this 11/0 and the 8/0, and then I'm going to start going through my 11/0s. And I'm just going to sew through all of them again. Make sure, as you do it, give it a nice little tug. Make sure everything is nice and neat, but do not pull it so tight that you crunch them, and don't miss any beads in your circle here. So just slowly, continuously go through each bead, securing them. And then when you get to the end, go through the 11/0 on this side, go through while you're coming out of that 11/0, and then go into the 8/0 and the 11/0 underneath it on this side of it. Go back into the 8/0 on your piece, and then work your way through this one more time. See, I like to arrange them so they don't get all bunchy. and then go ahead and sew through one more time, because you want this to be nice and strong, and otherwise when you try to clasp it, after clasping it several times, it's going to fall apart. So go ahead and sew up through one more time, then we'll come back and knot this off. Okay, so I have sewn through mine again, and I am ready to secure this and knot it off. So I'm just going to go ahead and sew down. I'm coming out of the 8/0 I'm attached to. I'm going to go down, sew through, and do exactly as I showed you before. I'm going to come up through the beads right underneath that 8/0 right there, and make a loop, tie a knot, drag my thread down in between the beads, and then I'm just going to sew a few more, and I'll sew down into the next flower like this, and tie off again. And I'll just continue doing that just like I did on the other side. Well, come here. Of course, this one wants to fuss with me. There we go. Until I'm satisfied with the amount of securing and knotting I have done. And then I will come back and show you the finished thing. So after you've secured enough, go ahead and cut off your thread, burn down the end, and we'll look at the finished product. And here it is. I went ahead and put it on and clasped it. I'll take it off and show you too, but this works really well. It's really good. I think next time I'd make it one more unit, just a little bit bigger. It's not small or tight, or it's a little small, but it's not tight, so I can wear this just fine. But I think, and it also helps hold a little tension on that, because it's not huge, and keep it clasping nicely. But I think I might next time make it just maybe one more unit, just so that it moves a little bit more on my wrist. But it works really well, looks really good. And let me take this off so you can see what it looks like. Oh, come here. Okay. And that is what that looks like. I think it's a really cute, simple little bracelet. And like I said, if you find that you need to sew back through your units a little bit and tighten them up a little closer, which, you know, on second thought, I wish I would have done another round through it, just because I like my stuff really tight, lots of tension. So I may do that if I make another one. But other than that, I think it turned out really cute. The clasping is really nice, works well. And that's that. Hope to see you next time. Bye-bye.